Okay, a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Open Educational Practices OEP special. I'm Alan, one of the academic developers at the National University of Singapore, also serving as an executive in ASCILITE. Very happy this afternoon to introduce the inaugural OEP-SIG webinar series. It's very historical. Just to give you a very quick introduction to this SIG. So OEP started about 18 months ago, and the aim of this SIG is to engage the higher education sector in discussions revolving around OEP at the individual, institutional, as well as national level. So this afternoon's webinar, organized by the SIG, is one of the many activities that's being planned to engage the community in this area. Now, at this point, I would like to introduce there are three coordinators in this SIG, who has been very instrumental in initiating this SIG. They are Adrian Stagg, a manager at the University of Southern Queensland, Dr. Carina Bossu, senior lecturer at the Open University in UK, and Dr. Michael Cowling, the senior lecturer in CQUniversity, Brisbane. So at this point, I would like to pass the time to Adrian. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Alan. And what I would like to do to start off with is, on behalf of my co-facilitators, Dr. Carina Bossu and also Associate Professor Michael Cowling, I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar, and also to thank ASCILITE for their support of this SIG, without which we wouldn't have been able to grow our membership, connect open education practitioners, and provide a supportive community for the sharing of practice. Now, we meet once per month, and we alternate between practical in-focus webinars, where we hear from practitioners who are engaged in a whole range of projects, whether it be from open textbooks to frameworks for open design and the like, through to other meetings where we gather up our community news, people share work and challenges, and we work very much around providing advocacy for open educational practice in Australian higher education. So it gives me great pleasure this afternoon to introduce Associate Professor Jay Cohen from Sturt University for this afternoon's webinar, From Business Faculty to Business as Usual. Now, Jay is certainly no stranger to presenting for ASCILITE. He's a passionate and innovative online learning professional with a highly regarded record in the delivery of high quality, scalable learning solutions across the higher education sector. Jay has over 20 years experience in tertiary and online education, as well as extensive people, project and process management experience. He is currently employed as the Director of Online Subject Development at Sturt University, where he is responsible for leading the Transforming Online Learning project across the university. The Director of Online Subject Development manages the online subject development, including digital technologists, learning designers, learning analysts, library staff and editors, so a very broad and diverse range of staff. Also, he works closely with each faculty leadership team. He has research interests in online learning, learning analytics, learning innovation and higher education assessment. So I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Associate Professor Jay Cohen, and I will hand the microphone over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'll talk a little bit about the sort of concept of business faculty, business as usual, because it's a very much a transitional piece here at Sturt University. So I was employed at Sturt University about 12 months ago in a new role, leading a project called Transforming Online Learning, or what we call TOL, Transforming Online Learning. So obviously Sturt University has been involved in online learning for a very long number of years, but the the market is getting particularly busy with online learning providers, and of Sturt University we want to keep at the forefront of innovation and the trends in online learning, and so I came on board last November, and my role as I'll talk through with this presentation, is really around leading the subject development, really transforming that subject development piece here at CSU. So before I was employed here, I was at Online Education Services, which was originally Swinburne Online. I'm most happy to take, I think Adrian's made a comment there about questions and taking those questions. I expect I'll talk for about 45 minutes, and then I'll open up for some questions there. But if there's a context-related question, then I'm happy to get to those as I can. So as I said, in my previous role, we had a huge number of subjects that we would develop. So in that role, we would look at about 250 subjects in a 16-week period. We're certainly not doing that sort of volume here at Sturt University, but partly what my role is at this point is to look at how we can manage greater output from a subject development perspective and how can make that process more business as usual. So currently the TOL project is running in the business faculty with the idea that eventually it will run across the university. So the presentation I'm outlining today is not a lot different to the presentation that I've ran internally. So I'll talk to you about some of the challenges we have at Sturt University, some of the things we've done to address that, some of the challenges with online learning and the market in generally and where things are at. Student engagement I'll talk about. And indeed, I'll also talk about, you know, our online students compared to our on-campus students, how we go about engaging them, and then I'll shift the focus a little bit in the latter part of the presentation to talk about the process, which is really how we're looking at scaling this piece. And as I said, we're very much in the proof of concept stage. I'll also share you know, really in a warts and all sort of way, the challenges and issues associated with where we're at now, and some of the things we're doing to overcome those. So that'll be the focus for the next 40 odd minutes. And as I said, I'll then pause after 40 minutes and provide an opportunity for any questions. But again, if you have something urgent or something in context, I'm happy to answer it if I possibly can. So huge growth in Australia in online learning, 72% in fact. So massive from 2010 to 2017, 58,000 students or 101,000 students or thereabouts, 72% growth. So the question is, with all that growth, where's it going? And to be really honest, at CSU, our student numbers have really been steady. So they've increased slightly, but they certainly haven't increased to reflect the growth that's occurring in the market. And I certainly think from a Sturt University perspective, they had a fair monopoly for a fair period of time as being one of the early adopters of online learning. And I think other universities are catching up. So there's not too many universities in Australia that aren't now providing some level of online learning to various degrees of quality, I think it's fair to say. And we'll talk about some of the things associated with that in a moment, but certainly huge growth in online learning in Australia. These are the top 10 six-year completion rates in Australian universities. So this is not just online. You can see at the top of that list, of course, Melbourne University, 2012, 2017 had an 89% completion rate. And then rounding at the top 10 is the University of Western Australia at 79%. So again, really high completion rates. And you can see for both of those at the top and bottom of that scale, their numbers have steadily increased. University of Western Australia now sitting at 79, and 2005, 2010 sitting at nearly 77%, so steady increase. And of course, Melbourne Uni at the top, 83.9, and now 89% completion rates. So fantastic completion rates. And the arguments there might be around the quality of the students or the focus of the students in the first instance, and ATAR scores at University of Melbourne are generally high. And so that's a very different demographic to the demographic of students that we work with at Sturt University. So we're not comparing apples for apples. Here, the entry points are very different, but you know that's the sort of completion rates. And of course, at Sturt University, we are not currently in that top 10. So we're a fair way down that list. What we're finding at Charles Sturt University is the student feedback from an online perspective really is showing us that there's a lot of issues here around learner engagement. So, overall the numbers are good, the teaching quality is good, the student support's pretty good, the learning resources are pretty good. But the learner engagement's fairly low. And we do have challenge in a lot of online learning environments, of course, but we certainly would like to see that a little higher than where that's at. So the challenge, of course, for any university moving into an online environment is how do you engage online learners as being fundamentally different to perhaps the way you might engage them in a classroom environment. These are faculty-based, so there's no key here. This is faculty-based within Charles Sturt University. I've taken that off. I'm mindful of not being too transparent, but these are across our faculties. The numbers are fairly consistent. 3 faculties, yeah. This slide, geez, it's a little distorted, but you can see here the interaction with different students is particularly low across our 3 faculties. The online or face-to-face discussions particularly low, and then the online learning material comes up a little bit, and the course being well structured comes up a little bit. But again, I'll just go back a slide. The learner engagement piece here has been a challenge for us. Interaction with other students and online face-to-face discussions are clearly the focus. And when we're talking about transform online learning, which is the piece that I'm working on, those 3 pieces have become a key focus for the work we're doing in the TOL project, the Transform Online Learning project. Just quickly, because for those of you that work in online environments, be fairly familiar with the data that I'm about to go through here. The slides here really talk about attrition in Australia in online modes, and what we know in online learning that they generally attract non-traditional students. So they're often online. Online students are often part-time, mature age, and as a result, they have lower completion rates. And so that, a challenging piece from a retention of students perspective, and then again from an engagement of student perspective, and therefore a student success perspective. So the challenge is keeping online students, engaging them, and then assisting with student success, so completion rates. And really what we're trying to set out to do at Charles Sturt University is really to address those 3 factors. You can't have student success if you don't retain them. You're unlikely to have student success if they can't be engaged in the first instance or in the second instance of retention. So those 3 areas are a key focus for us. The attrition factors I've touched on already is really around the university dropouts. And when these factors are present in particular students, they obviously compound. So at Charles Sturt University, we often have a low SES student, we often have an Indigenous student, we often have a 25 years and over student, and of course we have regional or remote students studying part-time. So there are a number of factors here that compound, making the risk factors significantly greater. And again, the first issue is retention. The university dropout rates you can see here are particularly high for males, particularly high for part-time students, particularly high for regional. And again, when the student is 2 or 3 or 4 of these things, then a compounding factor occurs. So retention is our first focus, and then again, student success or student engagement and student success. So Kath Stone's work, who some of you may be familiar with, there's a reference list at the end of this presentation, so you can have a look afterwards. But the Kath Stone talks about the high-risk students, and many of these are online. So often low academic achievement in high school, often first in family. There's the common technology issues, particularly for remote students. Confidence issues feelings of isolation, financial difficulties, sometimes learning difficulties, sometimes mental health challenges, disabilities, caring responsibility, family responsibility, employment commitments is a big factor, and lack of motivation, which could apply to perhaps an on-campus student as well. So all of these factors, again, going back to the previous slide, are largely picked up here, but again, they compound. And so for us, the online student and retaining the online student is particularly challenging. So the work we've been doing at Charles Sturt University has really been, really challenging the faculty and asking, is it the same? And so we look at the student costs associated with an on-campus student at a particular subject, and then we look at an online undergraduate subject as an example, just a comparative example. And what we're getting here, of course, is that the online campus, or the online student and the on-campus student are paying the same amount to do a subject at Charles Sturt University. So the challenge I've been, or the questions I've been asking is, are we treating these students the same? So our on-campus students would traditionally get the 2-hour lecture and the 1 hour of tutorial a week. So how are we managing the sort of synchronous piece in an online environment, and then what are we doing regarding the asynchronous piece? So how are we assisting students in an online environment where a lot of their time, of course, they are without an academic present, and how are we facilitating that learning? So there's a whole pedagogical challenge associated with online as being different from campus. We're trying to ask these questions to say, well, they pay the same, so are we treating them the same, and what does it look like? So again, I'm referencing Kath Stone's work here again, that quite often we talk about the online student as being or being considered on campus or among universities as being less important or a lower priority. And the danger, of course, is out of sight, out of mind. So they're not face-to-face. We're not seeing them in the same way. The question again is, are we treating them the same? So a lot of the literature does talk about, the poor cousin of the on-campus being the online student. And again, so part of the challenges here and part of the questions I'm asking is, what are we doing in the online space to facilitate learning? Certainly plenty of negative perceptions or preconceptions around online as being inferior to the on-campus experience. So, I certainly don't believe that should be the case. And the question is, are we designing for a pedagogical difference between an on-campus student and an online student? Because they are different. 41% of external students finish their studies compared to the 75%. McDougall's work here, and again, it's in the reference list. So that massive challenges associated with completion rates. So again, some of the references to the literature, Kath Stone's work looked at students studying online and did focus groups and interviews with academics and students. And these are some of the comments that came out of her research. The online student is a very different animal to a face-to-face course. And again, what I've been asking at Charles Sturt University is, if they are a very different animal, are we treating them differently, or are we taking our on-campus material and placing it in an online environment and crossing our fingers and hoping that our online students can cope with really a pedagogy that was designed for a face-to-face material? And I think that's what the second point there is, around face-to-face material, PowerPoint slides that are simply added to an LMS site, and good luck to the online students. So the online students then miss all the context associated with the bullet points or with a piece that's managed in a synchronous way on campus, or even if it is a recorded on-campus video of a lecture and then added to an online environment. The question again is that the right pedagogy? Is that the right service for an online student? So you don't just take it for an hour and put it up there. That's terrible. And this is the comment from a director of learning and teaching as part of the study. Plenty of that occurs, that we see a lot of that, slides, publisher slides being added to LMS sites, particularly in an online space. All right, so the question what I'm asking here, which I'm asking everywhere, is can we put our hand on our heart and say that we're providing the same level of service or the same pedagogical focus to our online students as we are to our on-campus students? It's an interesting question. It's a question that I guess you can ask at your own university, is when you are delivering something in an online way, what pedagogical adjustments have been made, and are you providing the same level of service? Do the online students get at least the same level of synchronous engagement with the academic? And arguably, they should get more. I mean, they are by nature distant. They are more difficult to bring back into the LMS or to the learning material, and so having more frequent synchronous sessions might be the way to go rather than less. But the tendency is to provide the online student with less. So just a little bit, I'll just cover this section fairly quickly. Engaging online learners, there's plenty of literature around there. Around how we use this. The student engagement's been a term that's thrown around a lot, certainly at Sturt University. At present, we don't have a university-wide definition of student engagement. So we do hear, in committees and teaching and learning groups across the university, we hear that term being used often, but we don't have a general term or a definition of that within the university. And I think that creates some problems because it does mean difference in different spaces, and we're not always talking about the same thing. And so I think having a university-wide definition of that is really interesting. So it'd be interesting, the question to ask again within your own universities, is there a definition of student engagement? Do we use that term and do we all mean the same thing? Are we all on the same page when we're using that term? We've certainly seen the change of the role of the educator. We see a lot of work being done online, the use of technology. I mean, I spoke to an academic 2 days ago, must have been yesterday, 1 day ago on Monday, that said, for the first 4 weeks of last semester, the academic had trouble with the technology and couldn't engage the online learners. Now, again, those students are paying exactly the same money, but for those first 4 weeks, a critical time in retaining students, pre-census, they had no access to the academic for 4 weeks. Probably had no idea whether the class was even running because no one was engaging with those students. And that was a great concern for me, that the academic was there without the technology capabilities or the ability to be able to manage the technology piece associated with engaging students online. The other key component here are the importance of the presence of the instructor or the teacher, and a strong teacher presence provides online students with a sense of belonging in really the same way that it does on campus. But of course, again, that those students are at a distance by nature, and so that the piece is for the academic is to bring those students into the LMS and bring them much closer. So those students that see a real connection between the academic and their learning material and their peers are more likely to persist with their studies. So again, quite often what we're doing is taking the on-campus piece, putting it online, and it's sort of like this, where we're sort of trying to catch the rain with half an umbrella and a saucepan. So if we met, student retention and engaging students, if we're using on-campus material or material that's pedagogically designed for on-campus or for a lecture, and putting that in an online environment, are we trying to catch the rain or trying to shield ourselves from the rain with a half beaten up umbrella, and really not designing for a pedagogically different for the online space, and I think that's the challenge. So again, I'll touch on this fairly quickly, and then I'll shift fairly quickly into the process piece. Student engagement is really about the physical and psychological energy that a student devotes to their academic experience. And of course, the strong correlation between student participation and online content and engagement online and the grade they receive. So we do see that correlation. So the students that are in the LMS are more likely to go on to succeed. And we always have the debate in online environments about, you know, the printed learning material. And of course, you can have this debate in your own university for many years to come. You know, I hear the academics saying, but the students love printed material. And I said, well, yes, they do, but it sends the students away from the LMS, so it doesn't bring them back in. So the tendency then is to go in as the student, print the material, and then arguably you won't see them. So the engagement occurs within the Canvas or Blackboard environment, or whatever you're working with. Not outside that. So to bring the students in, have access to the students, the academics online, their peers are online, and again, the printed learning material does tend to send them away from the LMS. So a normal online challenge and a debate that we'll be having in teaching and learning and within faculty for a long time to come, I suspect. So institutions are clearly responsible for environments that make learning possible. And really what it is about designing for learning. So we can't, you know, create learning through the design, but we can certainly make learning likely or less likely. And so that design piece is really important. Again, Kath Stone's work, I won't cover all of this in too much detail, but her earlier work from 2017 is around the guidelines associated with online learners, and clearly knowing who the students are in the first place, quality of online education, intervening early, pre-census, teacher presence really important, specific design for an online environment, engaging and supporting students online, using the analytics in a really targeted way so that the learning interventions can be targeted. And we've spent a lot of time at CSU on the analytics piece, particularly within the Transform Online project. So some really good guidelines there that are probably no major surprise, but really important. Excuse me. So a little bit about the TOLD project that I haven't covered already. We have an online learning model across the university. It's relatively new. I work largely as within the learning and teaching group at CSU, but I'm seconded to the business faculty, business justice and behavioural science faculty. So I largely sit here within the faculty. So I can't really speak more broadly around the other faculties, but I think there's pockets where this is being used really well, and of course pockets where it's not being used at all, and you would expect that. It does provide what I see is a really good framework for designing and engaging online learners. And if, you know, for those of you who work in online learning or teaching and learning or learning design, you would look at this model and go, yeah, of course, those things should be there. There should be adaptive learning, should be e-learning and interactive resources. There should be opportunity for peer-to-peer learning, should be a teacher presence, and ideally a strong teacher presence, interactions with students, and of course a close correlation to the profession, of course. So again, what we're trying to do in the project that I'm in charge of at Charles Sturt University is the pedagogical sequencing and scaffolding of learning to make learning more possible. So again, learning design is really about the design for learning. We can't specifically or speaking design or learning because the act of learning is a very individual piece, but we can certainly do a lot of things to make learning possible. And of course, there's a lot of things that we can do in the online environment that mean the reverse of that as well. So quite often we see pedagogical practices online that mean learning is highly unlikely. You know, scaffolding and organizing the material and managing, you know, user interface pieces to make learning more likely. So learning is better facilitated through structure, conceptual layers, levels, interactions, processes and products. All of those things are really important, and consistency of subjects. So again, our focus here has been on retention, student retention in the first place, to motivate, encourage, build confidence, promote student success. And then when we feel like we can retain the students, because that's the first hurdle, is then really to look at how we can engage them. And there's something about the aesthetics, there's something about an enticing and engaging environment, a learning management system that looks enticing, that isn't clunky or over-engineered. There's something about consistency, aligned, interactive, and multimedia pieces that assist our cohort of students that are largely time poor, juggling work, families, and all those things that I've touched on already. And then, of course, we want our assessments to be authentic, aligned, of course. We want to minimize the volume of assessments. We arguably want a low stakes pre-census, particularly in a first year subject, to build confidence and create flexibility. And we have a tool at Sturt University called Assist, which allows students to select a submission date that suits them based on a window. We also love to see exemplars and rubrics, of course, which all of these help with time poor students. So big slide here with a lot of things on it, but really our focus has been first and foremost on consistency within the subject. We had subjects within degrees, so we would have, students would do 24 subjects in a degree, and every one of those learning management sites. So the sites would look completely different. There was no consistency, their terminology was different, so sometimes they'd be assessments, sometimes they'd be assignments. Sometimes that'd be a discussion board, sometimes that'd be a board, sometimes that'd be a forum, sometimes, we students had no idea whether we're talking about the same things. The navigation was inconsistent, the labels on the side, sometimes they were topics, sometimes they were modules, sometimes they were weeks. So we worked on style and navigation and minimization of clicks. We had a color palette that was narrowed down, terminology, use of verbs, use of boxes, consistent icons, like basic, really fundamental user interface piece on the left that was really important. And then on the right, the pedagogical pieces, some of which lend themselves specifically to an online environment, and some of them are just good pedagogy. Scaffolding, of course, learner choice, but not too much choice for online students. That can be really challenging. Student-to-student interaction, teacher presence. Again, I've covered a lot of these things already. Forums for learning, framing and bookends, and a narrative that runs through the sites. From a learner interface perspective, we looked at usability principles and learnability. And rather than have too much choice, kept it simple and consistent. The aesthetics were important, really important. So when a student logs into a learning management site, they see something that is engaging, that they want to click around and explore. They're not overwhelmed. They don't see folders with PowerPoint presentations in there, or sites that are completely cluttered with pages of scrolling that need to be read, and text on a screen. None of these things are going to create engagement for students. So it's a very quiet design. Things sit in the background and are very subtle. User interface is consistent. The accessibility pieces are front and center, and we use affordances and signifiers so that when the student sees a blue heading indented in bold, they know what that means. So the iconography and the fonts are consistent, so the students don't have to go, well, hang on, last time this word was written in blue, now it's in green. Does that mean the same thing, or is it something different this time around? So eliminating all of those pieces where students often spend the cognitive challenges trying to figure out where things are, so this way they can spend their time looking at the learning material. This was a site that we inherited in one of the development pieces that we had early in the piece. This was a landing page for a student. This is what they got. They got nothing else on the site. Julie's just asking a question that I'm sure everyone you can see. I think there's a fine line between uniqueness. I think it creates a lot of confusion for students. So there has to be pedagogical uniqueness, because subjects are not all the same. They shouldn't be delivered the same. But terminology, location of things should be consistent across a qualification, because those things get in the way of student learning. So I think the nuances belong in the pedagogy, not in the interface. So this was a site that we inherited, and where we ended up with, this again is, this was some psychology subjects, all the same, in the same degree. They all look like this, all called different things. Some of them, with tiny little photos in the corner, some with no photos, some called different things. You get the idea. And aesthetically, this is where they ended up with from a landing page perspective. 3 buttons at the bottom, always clicking through to the same thing, a welcome video to the academics, some text that incorporated the same key concepts in every instance to welcome the students and open up the student learning piece. So these are, really inconsistent. So you can imagine the student landing here and going, okay, where do I go? Where do I find things? What's it called? To a place here where things were accessible and easy to be located. Yeah, so the challenge, Victoria, is around consistency. Academics are very much used to doing their own thing. So it's been a work in progress. I think within the business faculty here at CSU, we've really got some really great buy-in from heads of school. And that's filtered down. So it's not a discussion that comes up a great deal anymore, but it was a fair bit of work associated with that, no question about it. Okay, so a couple of the processes we worked on. This is our team. I won't cover this slide too much. We have, Director of TOL, that's me there with a beard. We have a quality assurance person, online resource developers, digital technologists, a fairly standard sort of arrangement, a project coordinator, digital technologists, of course. The academic sits within that mix as the subject matter expert, and we also have a learning coordinator that provides academic support around teaching online. So it's professional learning coordinator. So that's the team, the TOL subject development team. And this is really what we've done. So we have a pre-development phase, a subject development phase, and a post-development phase. So after the subjects are developed, we review those subjects. We use an Agile approach. So we look at subject reviews and subject retrospectives in an Agile way. So a subject review is we're actually pulling the subject apart and going, how does it align with the online model? Where was it met that learning online learning model, and where didn't it meet that model? Yeah, and Julie, your comment around, is it static? That's a landing page, and the learning for us doesn't occur on a landing page. It occurs within the learning material, and so it's not meant to be dynamic. The dynamic piece and the interactive piece happens within the learning material. So that's the distinction we've made within the TOL project. So we have a master list, pre-development standard emails, regular meetings and consultation with academics. And the academics are given 40 hours of time within a 4-week sprint. So again, using an Agile terminology, we use a 4-week sprint. I'll just come back to that slide if I've got time. We have everything process mapped. So minus 12 weeks out from the development phase, we start working with the academic and building a master list, which is really what is the subject, who's the academic, who's the teaching academic, which sprint have they been assigned to. It's really like a big database, and we're about to move that into a JIRA environment. We have weekly status reports that keeps heads of school and key stakeholders in the loop. Where are we up to at the subject? What's going on with the subject? What's the issue associated with the subject? What's going on? What's the issue with the subject? So green is a good status. It means it's going well. Amber means we've got some concerns. And red means we've got a fair disaster going on. The status report allows us to take an early intervention. So we're developing subjects over a 4-week period. So my team would have about 5 or 6 subjects within a 4-week period to develop. And at the end of that 4 weeks, those subjects are completed. So early intervention is really important. So again, we're using a SCRUM or an Agile framework, which is a project management methodology, and that is where the sprint type approach comes into it. I'll leave this slide for later reference, but it's a fairly standard sort of SCRUM approach. There is a Scrum Master and a development team, and the subjects come in to the sprint approach, which is the sort of circular piece here. There is a daily stand-up for the team. So the team would be a learning designer, digital technologist, and an online resource developer, all working together with the academic to get the subject ready to go. And then at the end, when the subject's completed, we would run a review, which is a process review and a retrospective on what went well from a process perspective. So for us at Charles Sturt University, each development period or semester is divided into 4 sprints. So we run 3 semesters a year, and each one of those is divided into 4 4-week sprints. And product development is contained within those 4 weeks. Excuse me. So again, 3 semesters, 3 development periods consisting of 4 development periods each. At the end of those sprints, the subjects are finished and they go to the quality assurance person. But the work is finished and the development team move on to the next bank of subjects. And this is how we've managed to scale the development. So the key essence around what we've done here is around this approach. So for us at Charles Sturt University, we're currently developing between 20 and 30 subjects per session. And that number will continue to increase. So in my previous role, those numbers were significantly larger, but it's just an issue associated with resourcing, really. So some of the challenges, just to sort of tidy things up, having a style guide. So, fonts need to be the same, icons need to be the same, all of those things. And that really stems to having a consistent approach. And when academics are updating the sites post-development, we want them to use the style guide. So that the sites are kept consistent. Handing over the subjects to academics, teaching in TOL and student engagement is still a challenge, and we're working on that with the professional learning coordinator that's recently been employed. Ownership of subjects is still a challenge. Rebuilding subjects, student portal for those generic things that students go back to time and time again, writing, rather than having those things embedded within a subject. My preference is to keep those separate so that we reference the same material. And of course, the classic is, scope creep and TOL criteria. So as soon as we start developing a subject and working with an academic, what about we do this and what about we do that? Which are all great ideas, but in a 4-week development period, it's particularly challenging. We still have challenges with pedagogy around online PDF use, slide use, lectures, how we use those, terminology issues, and again, I've touched on the printed learning material piece. So there's some online pedagogy challenges as well. Some other issues are for us around recruitment in a regional environment gets particularly difficult. Time to competency and upskilling our team, particularly when we moved into a sprint and an agile environment. There was certainly some development opportunities that were particularly challenging. And of course, alignment with micro-credentialing or micro-course, and the distinction between what we're marketing and what we're providing from a pedagogy perspective for our students. Again, all of those are challenges. I've covered a lot in a very short period of time, but I'm happy at this point to open up for questions. I suspect there's a few because, again, as I said, I've talked through that fairly quickly. Josh, I don't know whether it's a question. Yeah, interface consistency has been a particularly important thing. We want to take a fair component of that off the table. So from a student perspective, they're getting consistency. The team roles, yep, I'll go back to that. I don't know how far back it is, so forgive me. There it is. Elaine, there you go. Yeah, Bruce, David, yeah, it sounds like those challenges are fairly normal. Certainly, in my previous role, I was involved in 5 different universities as partners to the organisation I worked with, and we were the same challenges in 5 of those different universities. So I've done this sort of work in a number of locations, and yeah, fairly consistent challenges. No worries, Elaine, I hope that helps. Yeah.
Jay, there is a question from Meredith who asks, how many subjects are developed at the same time?
Within a sprint, 6, about 6, and within a session or a semester, if you like, about 25 or 30. So we would have little swarms, which is the Agile term, a learning designer, digital technologist, and an online resource developer, all working on one subject for one sprint, one 4-week period, and then it's done. Yeah, I don't think
there's
consistency. Sorry, I'll just answer Lisa. I don't think there's a fine line between consistency and dullness. I think the pedagogy is where the focus should be, and aesthetics. But I think consistency can still be really engaging and not dull. So I'm not quite sure I agree with that one, Lisa. But yeah, I can understand why you might have brought that up.
And Darcy has asked a question of you, Jay. Are there students who are involved in any part of the design process?
No, we use the student feedback extensively. So part of the pre-development work we do is the analytics, and by the time we meet with the academic for the first time, we're presenting all the analytics, click-throughs, time on page, access to interactives, the whole student feedback thing, pass rates, retention, all of those pieces we're covering early in the piece. So it's a good question. We're not involving students in the development as such, but we're certainly using the analytics. I think, David, you got a question there around what is it the academic is producing or doing. So in the sprint, the academic is really collaborating with the learning designers. So the learning designers are building out narratives and building interactive components and are asking for content from the academic. So the academic is really set up as a subject matter expert. So the learning designers are not subject matter experts, they're online design experts.
There is one question as well for you from Michelle, of particular interest as well to me, in that is accessibility part of the process of design?
It certainly is. So at the design stage, and part of the style guide that we're now developing has a whole lot of accessibility standards in there, and certainly by the time the subject is developed and goes to our quality assurance team, that's a key focus for the work that they do there as well. Yeah, and I think Josh, a good point there. That's my thinking as well, is that the consistency takes those challenges off the table for students, and then they're able to use the headspace to be engaged in the learning material, rather than having to manage all the navigation pieces and terminology pieces. It's yeah, a much better approach from my perspective.
Jay, sorry, Adrian. I was just saying, Victoria also asked an interesting question about upskilling and build capacity of faculty members and academics. So the question is, do you also upskill faculty in teaching online, as you spoke of pedagogy?
Yeah, we do. Look, again, that learning coordinator role that we've that's in the map there, that shows the staff and the resources. That role's just been appointed, but that's certainly going to be a focus. You can design online learning all you like, but if you don't have faculty staff that understand online learning is different, and facilitation of online learning is different, then you're going to struggle. So it's a key focus of the TOL project.
We also have two other questions, so I'll start with the first one for you, Jay, from Lucia, and I hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. They ask, in the online learning model, how do you provide flexible adaptive learning?
Well, probably not now in a way that we would like. We build interactive pieces within the particular topic that are adaptive. So we're building it sort of in isolation, if you like, at this point in time. Going forward, we'll be looking at doing that more broadly and having a greater adaptive release around the topic. We're just not doing that yet. We're sort of a crawl before you can walk sort of approach at this point. There's another question here. Oh, you go, Adrian, sorry.
The second question there that I was flagging, Carmen asks, about the processes, would you be able to show the slide with the workflow diagram again, please?
I can. I don't know how useful that is. It's a bit small. And it's only half a map, but it shows minus 12 weeks out, we commence. So this is 12 weeks before the development period or the semester starts. And by -7, there's obviously -6, -5, -4, and there's activities associated with every single week. We're sending out academic emails, we're coordinating with staff, we're running heads of school meeting, whole lot of things we're doing at various points. Just another question on the discussion is how many weeks of content? The academic provides the full 12-week semester worth of learning material to the learning designer at the commencement of the development. There might be some adjustments along the way, but we expect that the material is ready to go before we can develop the subject. So if the academic says, look, I've only got the first 4 weeks or only got the first 2 weeks, we would say that subject's not ready for the Transform Online project. We need all of that material. I'm just mindful I've got a couple minutes left. I do have to leave in 2 minutes if there's any other burning questions. Otherwise, I'm most happy if anyone wants to send me an email. If you have any questions, I'm happy to make some connections, or you can look me up on LinkedIn if you like. Josh, send me an email. I'm not quite sure what you're after, but I'm happy to. The references are here. Sorry, forgive me. Or send me an email, I'll send you the reference list. But they are all, take a screenshot of that if you like.
But what we can also do, Jay, if you are happy to do so, is that when we post up the recording of this session, whether or not it might be possible to get a copy of the slides and we can post all of those resources together. Would that be acceptable to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. So that means that anyone then who clicks on the links in the follow-up email, that will mean then that you'll have access to everything in this presentation.
Yeah, it's fine. No problem at all. And again, if any of you want to reach out, have any further questions, I'm happy to take questions later on, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. And it seems from the feedback that we're getting in all of the chat area that we're getting quite a lot of people stating that this has been very useful, and thank you very much for presenting today. So on behalf of the OEP-SIG and my co-facilitators, I'd like to thank you, Jay, for presenting today and for sharing your journey. And the one thing, though, that I did really appreciate as part of this, that is a really big part of open practice, is transparency and also an authenticity about the challenges that occurred. So in terms of how well that aligns with open practice, I think that that you're definitely in good company here.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, look, massive challenges, but yeah, still a few to go. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you everybody for attending, and what we will do is ensure that we have a copy of this presentation and the recording through as soon as we can. So just on behalf of my co-facilitators, thank you for joining us today and have a good afternoon.